What if the entire software industry, the thing that has powered the modern world for the last 3 decades, is quietly losing its value right now? And most people haven't noticed? Not in some distant future. Not in a hypothetical scenario, but in real time as you watch this. Because something has changed, and once you see it clearly, it becomes very difficult to unsee. Recently, a former big tech engineer with over 25 years of experience shared something that, at first, sounded almost unbelievable. He had just finished working on a small side project. Nothing extraordinary on the surface. But as he looked at what he had built, something hit him. That same project, just a few years ago, would have required an entire startup. Dozens of engineers, months of development, millions of dollars in funding, and yet now he had completed it alone in just a matter of days. That moment wasn't just surprising, it was revealing, because it pointed to something much bigger than one project. It revealed that the core assumption the entire software industry was built on is starting to collapse. For decades, software has been expensive, not just financially, but structurally. You needed highly skilled engineers, large coordinated teams, time, infrastructure, and layers of complexity just to bring an idea to life. That difficulty created scarcity, and scarcity is what gave software its value. If something is hard to build, it becomes difficult to compete with. And that difficulty created what people in business call moats. These moats protected companies. They made it nearly impossible for smaller players to catch up. And over time, those moats turned into trillion-dollar industries. Entire economies were shaped around this idea. Education systems pushed people toward coding. Governments encouraged digital transformation. Physical industries slowly declined while software became the center of innovation, power, and wealth. But all of that depended on one assumption: that building software would always remain difficult. And that assumption is no longer true. Artificial intelligence has changed the equation in a way that most people are still underestimating. It hasn't just made software development faster, it has fundamentally reduced the effort required to create it. Today, a single person with access to advanced AI tools can do what once required entire teams. Code can be generated in seconds. Bugs can be identified and fixed almost instantly. Entire systems can be designed, tested, and deployed with a level of speed that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. What used to take months now takes weeks. What used to take weeks now takes days. And when something that was once rare becomes easy to produce, its value doesn't just decrease, it collapses. This is where the real shift begins. Because it's not just about speed, it's about competition. For the first time, small AI-powered teams can compete with massive companies. A handful of people can now build tools, platforms, and systems that rival products created by organizations with thousands of employees. Think about that for a moment. Entire categories of software enterprise platforms, marketing tools, automation systems can now be replicated at a fraction of the cost and in a fraction of the time. This isn't just disruption, it's compression. Years of development are being condensed into weeks. Barriers that once protected companies are disappearing. And when those barriers disappear, the market changes. But there's an even deeper layer to this transformation, because it's not just about how software is built, it's about how it's used. Traditional software depends on interfaces. You open an app, you click through menus, you type commands, you navigate systems designed for human interaction. That interface is where much of the value lived. But AI is removing the need for that entirely. Instead of learning how to use a tool, you simply tell AI what you want, and it handles the rest. You don't need to open multiple tabs to research something. You don't need to manually compare options. You don't need to follow a process. The process disappears. And when the process disappears, so does the need for many of the tools built around it. This is where AI agents come in. These are systems that don't just respond to instructions, they act on them. They can browse, analyze, decide, and execute tasks on your behalf. Imagine asking a system to plan a trip. Not just suggest destinations, but actually compare flights, book tickets, reserve hotels, and organize your schedule without you ever touching a single interface. At that point, the value of traditional software platforms starts to fade, because those platforms were designed for human interaction. And if humans are no longer the ones interacting, then what happens to the systems built around them? This is especially important when you think about companies whose business models depend on user behavior. Platforms that rely on clicks, attention, and engagement begin to lose their leverage when AI becomes the primary actor. Because AI doesn't click ads. It doesn't browse endlessly. It simply completes tasks. And that changes the flow of value. So if software is becoming easier to build, easier to replicate, and in many cases no longer necessary in its current form, where does that value go? It doesn't disappear. It shifts. And right now, that shift is moving towards something much more physical. Because AI, for all its capabilities, depends on one critical resource: compute, massive amounts of it. Behind every AI system are data centers filled with powerful hardware, GPUs, servers, cooling systems, energy infrastructure, all working together to make these systems function. And unlike software, these things cannot be easily replicated. You can copy code, you can generate applications, but you cannot instantly create the physical infrastructure required to run large-scale AI systems. That becomes the new bottleneck. And wherever the bottleneck is, that's where value accumulates. This is why industries that were once considered secondary are becoming central again. Semiconductor manufacturing, data center construction, energy production, and raw material extraction are all becoming critical parts of the AI economy. Because without them, none of this works. At the same time, this shift is changing the nature of work itself. For years, digital skills were seen as the future. Learning to code was considered one of the most valuable things you could do. And for a long time, that was true. But now, as AI begins to automate many of those digital tasks, the value of purely software-based skills is starting to shift. Meanwhile, skills tied to the physical world building, maintaining and operating real systems are becoming more important. Electricians, engineers, technicians, people who work with infrastructure are stepping into a new kind of relevance. Because in a world where the digital becomes easy, the physical becomes scarce. And scarcity, as we've seen, is where value lives. But this transition isn't going to be smooth. Entire sectors of the software industry are going to feel this shift. SaaS platforms, marketing tools, CRM systems, consumer apps, many of them were built on the idea that software is difficult to create and maintain. As that assumption breaks down, so does their advantage. And when advantage disappears, competition increases. Prices drop, margins shrink, and in many cases, entire categories begin to collapse. Not overnight, but gradually, then suddenly. This is how major transitions happen. At first, it feels like a small improvement. Then it accelerates. And before most people realize what's happening, the landscape has completely changed. So what we're witnessing right now isn't just a technological upgrade. It's a redistribution of value. From digital to physical. From software to infrastructure. From complexity to simplicity. And for those who understand this shift early, there is opportunity. Because every major transformation creates winners and losers. The challenge is recognizing which side you're on before it becomes obvious to everyone else. Because once it's obvious, it's usually too late. And that brings us to the bigger question. If AI continues on this path, making software easier to create, easier to replace, and less valuable over time, then what does the future of technology actually look like? Not just for companies, but for individuals, for the way we work, the way we build, the way we create value. Because the real story here isn't that AI is making software better, it's that it's quietly making it less important. And once that happens, everything changes. If you've made it this far, then you're already thinking about this at a deeper level than most people. So make sure you subscribe, because we're going to keep breaking down these shifts as they happen, so you're not reacting to the future. You're prepared for it. And if you want to understand what this leads to next, watch the next video on your screen, because this transformation is just getting started, and the next phase might be even bigger than this one.